Hi there, welcome back to the channel. Welcome to the second video in the restoration of this Philips Antoinette, the Bond radio. This lady is behaving herself quite well. She's got her clothes back on. Sorry guys, but I had to do a lot of body work. It sounds weird. I had to do a lot of restoration of the actual elements that make up the chassis, and I wanted to see if everything just fit back together. This sounds like Frankenstein excusing himself. I'm sorry. But I had to make sure that all the little bits that I glued, a little piece of plastic floating around, I had to make sure that they all fit well and that the whole thing goes back together, because sometimes you just have one little piece that's out of joint, and then when you think you're finished, you have to dismantle the whole thing. It's not completely together because part of it still is not working. If you saw the first video in the series, you'll know what I'm talking about. But I am happy to say that I think I know where the problem is. I'm not going to say any more. I hope you stick around and I hope you enjoy the video. Well, quite a bit's been done, as you can probably tell. I've been doing a lot of cosmetic work. This body needed some help, and most of it was quite superficial. The front just needed some shoe polish on that black section there. Everything else was cleaned properly. Nothing really damaged here. The back was a different story. There was a lot of little pieces of leather that was loose, and that was stuck down, and then everything was polished with shoe polish. It's been cleaned, polished, and now the last buff will just wait till the end. But it's looking like new. Look at that. Everything came out fantastically. Now, I wanted to get these out of the way because, as you may remember, these are the parts I don't really enjoy, but those are ready to go back on when I have, well, the main chassis done. And also quite a bit's been done on there as well. The battery holder's been refreshed. I had to put some new wire there, clean some of those springs. It's looking pretty good. I had to remove those two screws on that side. I actually had to drill them out, but they're brass, so they came out quite easily. And I now put this aside, again, ready for the end. The speaker is looking pretty good. Now, what I had to do, this thing was completely rusted out, so I cleaned everything. I had to scrape some of the rust off. I then coated it with an anti-rust coating, like a base, and then I actually sprayed it. Now, I'm going to show you a new tool that I've got in a couple of days that I use to spray this. I've always wanted it. I won't give too much away, you can probably guess, but look at the result. It's really, really nice. And again, the back's been all cleaned up, so the speaker's back. The solder tags have been cleaned up as well. So this is also ready for the final putting together. Now let's look at the chassis. This whole section here below the battery connector or battery holder was completely, it wasn't really rusted, it was corroding quite badly. So again, I had to clean that up, and I gave it a little coat of anti-rust base. This stays behind the holder so you won't see it, but it's now protected against further degradation. You know, there was another bit of rust, so again, that's been removed. Everything else is looking good so far. I did a repair on that antenna selector. The vertical clip was broken off, and I ended up trying to repair it, and it seems to work. What I did was I got a little strip of metal. This actually came from the lid of a well, I think it was a glass jar can. It's metallic. So I cut a strip and I put a bit of heat shrink at the end. That's the black part you see there. Bent it 90 degrees and then stuck it to the selector because the little knob, or what do you call that, had broken off. So this thing seems to be working now. This is the antenna select. Well, it's coming loose again. Well, that wasn't a good solution. I'm going to have to find a way to glue that more permanently. It's not perfectly tight. So as I speak, I found I've got something else to do. But There are a couple of electrolytics on here. Here's one, here's one, here's one. This is the FM discriminator one, and I wanted to swap that out because I wanted to see if that's the cause of the lack of FM. However, I've got to warn you, working on the back of this board is a nightmare. The tracks are incredibly fragile, very, very thin. You know, I'd almost advise you not to touch it if you can avoid it. I would have not got into there if, you know, if I knew just how sensitive it was. But anyway, that discriminator cap has been replaced. But if you look at the, well, look at the thickness or lack of thickness of these little tracks, you'll understand why I say to leave it alone. It is very, very sensitive, very, very fragile. And again, as I said, I probably would not touch that if I'd known. One of the little tracks there on the discriminator cap actually broke off, so I had to fix that up. It was not fun, but at least it's done. But by the way, FM is not back yet, so that wasn't the problem. What do I need to do next? Well, there are some adjustments to do. The service manual actually gives us some instructions on how to set some of the voltages on here. I looked at the manual, I checked those voltages, and they are pretty close. I mean, they're not exact. These things are never exact, but they're pretty close. Some of those voltages I'm not even going to tweak. One of the adjustments that I always try to do is to check the quiescent current of the output transistors. These transistors are pretty rare. I don't want to overheat them. So I went and checked on the instructions, and it's pretty simple. There's a little bridge over here. It's right over there. You have to desolder it. Just suck it up with a bit of solder wick. I've soldered 2 little wires to each end of it. You put a milliammeter between them, and then you adjust this pot over here till you get 5 milliamps. Now, they tell you to put the volume way down, which I believe it is, yes. And I'll switch it on. I'm not actually sure what it's giving us. Oh, that is pretty close. Maybe just a little tweak. Sometimes it's best to just leave these things, but for the sake of completeness. These trimmers are notoriously sensitive. They are single turn pots. It's going to go back to where it was, isn't it? I'm going to leave it at about that. Maybe I'll just let it warm up a little bit. It takes a few minutes till you get the right, get it into quiescent condition, temperature-wise, and then you just adjust it a little bit. Get it down to 5 milliamps and we're good to go. Then we just remove those 2 little wires and remake that bridge with solder. Good. I'm following my usual routine. I'm trying to get the AM completely finished, and that requires an IF alignment. I'm not sure that it requires it. I just want to do one just to check that everything's working well. And what they tell us to do is to send a signal. They tell us 470. I think that's a mistake on instructions, but they tell us to feed a 470 kilohertz. I'm feeding a 452, which is the IF frequency. I've got it set to the minimum amplitude, because then it goes down into that switch attenuator, and I'm putting about 18 dB, 24 dB attenuation here. This has got to be pretty weak. This has got a capacitor between it, so it's already AC coupled. And I'm going to send a modulated signal in there at 1 kilohertz to see what we get. And where does that go? Well, it's actually pretty simple. The entire IF block is this over here. It's the ones in red. Those are the IF transformers that we need to adjust for the AM IF. And they tell us to feed it into a point somewhere here, adjust the last one, a point somewhere here, adjust these 2, and then somewhere in the switches actually, and adjust those 2. What I'm going to do is slightly different. I'm going to check the entire IF chain in one go because I know that it's working. This thing is receiving. I just want to make a few adjustments. And so I looked on the schematic, and the best place to inject it is actually at the base of this transistor here, which on the schematic shows us as the base of the transistor that's receiving the RF signal, the carrier with modulation on it. So I'm feeding it to the base there. Remember, this has got capacitor coupling this to the signal generator. The signal coming in here is very, very small. It's 1.4 millivolts RMS coming out of the signal generator, and it's attenuated by 24 dBs. I may have to raise that a bit, I'm not sure. We'll see how it goes. And then what I've got is, I've got the signal coming in here, and I've got the audio coming to this to the speaker, where I can either have it as speaker or dummy load, so we don't have to listen to it. We'll leave it on speaker for now. At the back of the speaker, I'm taking these two leads off to the AC millivolt meter, which is this guy over here. So that's going to measure the audio output, and we can then get a relative reading as to the amplitude of the signal. And I'll be monitoring this when I do the alignments. So let's get started. Okay, let's give it some volume. I've got the signal coming in. And as you can see, we can hear it and we can see it. I'm going to put this on dummy load so we don't have to hear it. We just follow the meter. Now the first one I'm going to do is this guy over here. This is CC. See if we can get any improvement. A little bit. That seems to be it. Very small improvement. Then this one here. Oh, no. That was pretty much aligned as it was. This one here. Same with this one. Finally, or second to last one is this one here. These guys are pretty much perfectly aligned. Last one. We got very little out of that, and looks like the whole thing is pretty well aligned. So our IF alignment for the AM is done at 452 kilohertz. Simple as that. Sometimes things do go well. So what has this done to reception? Well, medium wave. Ah. This is all Canary Islands on medium wave. Let's try shortwave 1. 1 is that guy there. We're up here on the 16 meters. So you see, that's working well, and this is early afternoon, so shortwave should be almost deaf right now, but we're getting it, and I think I'm very, very happy with the result of this alignment because there was nothing to do, so it was perfectly well aligned, which leads me to believe that perhaps the actual RF alignment is the same. I'm going to check that. I'm going to send some signals into the antenna at certain frequencies, probably, beginning and end of the dial. I won't even look at the service manual and see what it is that we're actually getting. Let's try that. Here's a signal at 20 megahertz. There's 20 on the band. It is pretty damn spot on. I'm not changing anything. I can't go above 20 megahertz with this signal generator, so I'm going to try down here, 16.3 megahertz. Let's see how that goes. A bit further in there. Let's try down here at 8 megahertz. So shortwave 2. That's not it. Let's try 8.5. It's a little bit out. It is a little bit out. Let's try 14 over here. It's not too bad. So I may have to do an RF alignment after all. When I was checking the RF alignment, I started with medium wave and Medium wave is fine, but I noticed something. Shortwave is completely dead. Now, I thought this was because of reception times and everything else, but I did try and send a signal in here and it's completely dead. I hear the noise, but no signal. So I've got to trace the schematic and see what's going on. Well, I found the problem, and it was actually very simple. I've got that loop on there. They tell us to do the medium wave and long wave alignment using a loop. So it's induced into the Faraday antenna. I have the signal generator sending a 157 kilohertz signal, and we have a marker on there. I think you can see that. And I'm actually watching the meter. Put the speaker on. I'm watching the meter, and I'm going to just watch the meter and peak the signal. It is just out, just a slight little bit out. So I'm not even sure that I should do anything about it. Who am I kidding? I'm going to do it. That's Q over there. And I've got it now at exactly 157. And I'm watching the meter. I won't bore you with that. I'll watch the meter and peak it. There we go. That's perfect. Now, what else do we need to do? That, of course, was the oscillator. Now, they tell you that you can adjust the antenna coil, the front end, by adjusting the ferrites. Now, I'm not sure I want to touch this. These guys are completely sealed in place. I'm going to leave those well enough alone. Let's look at medium wave. Now, with medium wave, they tell us to put it on. Let's put that on medium wave, sound on. They tell us to put it on 550. Notice that kilohertz. Notice that these guys have only got one adjustment point, the short wave, the medium wave and long wave. So 550, we can hear it already. I'm watching the meter, where's 550? It's just slightly out again. That is where it's supposed to be. And we're supposed to adjust P, which is, I believe, that guy there, is it? Yeah. That one there, I'll do the same thing. You can just hear it. It's getting tuned, but I'm watching the meter. There we go. Now if I move around 550, that is perfectly peaked. So we have done medium wave and long wave. Well, that was easy. As I said, there's only one adjustment point for both of them. 550 is actually, there's a little triangle there, a little marker there. So we know that that works. Those are the two alignment points. Now let's look at shortwave. For shortwave 4, they tell us to put it at 1.66, and I don't see any mark on the actual shortwave 4 band. So I presume it's the same lineup as the previous one. And if I give it some sound, it again is just slightly off. So we want it there. Give it a bit more boost. And we need to adjust these two guys. But I want to carry it in. Let's see if we can do that. Over there. I'm just watching the meter, peaking it at that spot. It's exactly on there now. There we go. And this one, I'm not sure what this one is for, but it's the same. That's not doing much. Okay, that's the oscillator aligned. Okay, what else did they tell us to do? So I think I'm going to consider my RF alignment about as much done as I want to do. You're probably wondering whether I'm getting senile and I forgot to fix the FM and show you. Well, I haven't. And the reason is I have not finished the FM. I have not restored the FM. What I have done is put this thing together because I wanted to make sure that everything was going to fit well, because I did some gluing of little bits and pieces that had broken off the chassis, the plastics. And when you glue those back, you sometimes get a bit of a surprise. They don't fit anymore. Well, this thing fits perfectly, as you can see, and the result is very, very good. I like it. I like it. This the sides look like new. The top, same story. It's perfect. There's no dents, there's no dings, there's no marks. Obviously, there's a final polish and buff that I can give this when it's over, when it's done. But at the moment, I put all this back, and I know that I may have to remove this all again. But the reason is I've got the AM done, and I wanted to test the AM in an enclosed environment, because sometimes when you align these things and then you close them, the metal structure around it, the cabinet structure, can actually throw things out of alignment. And I'm happy to say that this has not happened. And I'm also happy to say that the result is very good.
Remember the date, remember the time, because I know you've just given me a book.
This is BBC World Service on about 16 megahertz. It's early afternoon here, so I'm actually quite surprised by how good this thing receives on shortwave. And medium wave, I think it's probably... it's good. That's the local station, so it should be quite good. But this is Canary Islands. So everything is working well on AM, everything. And that's really all I've done so far. Finished the AM. And the next step is obviously the FM. As you can see from the back, I've not finished this. I've not even put the battery holder in here. That is still going to go in because I may need to touch something there. But I've got a feeling I know what's wrong with the FM. You see, I have reason to believe that the problem with the FM is right at the front end. And the reason I believe that is I got ready with a signal coming from a signal generator at the IF frequency, which is 10.7 megahertz. And I put it over here. See that? This is the absolute start of the entire FM chain. This is the FM front end. And if I take this modulated signal, this is it's basically a carrier signal at the IF frequency for the FM, 10.7 megahertz. I'm modulated with a 1 kilohertz tone, and I'm just passing it through a little loop of wire coming out of the signal generator. And as I approach it, I'm not really so much approaching there as I am the wires coming out of there. These wires coming out of there are the signal going to the IF chain of the FM. This thing starts working. So that tells me that from here forwards, remember, all this has to do from here forwards is to filter and demodulate this carrier 10.7 megahertz and give me the audio tone, which it's doing. So I may need to open the front and do some alignment, but until I get this thing producing this by itself, there's no point. So that's what I'm doing next. I'm going to focus on the FM. I'm going to be removing this, this front end. I'm going to open it up. I may not have to remove it per se, but I can open it up, find out what's going on in here, and that should sort out the FM. I'm quite confident it shouldn't be too difficult. There's a schematic for this. There's a signals diagram, so I should be able to do this. I may, as I said, have to remove the front again. Remember, the front will just come up. All I need to do is remove the 4 knobs, and the front should do this sort of gull wing opening, so I can still get to the front of this, but as I said, I don't think I have to. That's what I'm going to do in the next video, which I hope will be the last one. But as I said, I wanted to see what this thing looked like in the cabinet, just to make sure that everything fit nicely, that none of these hooks that I glued on break, and they haven't so far. So I'm pretty pleased with the results so far. I'm finding this one quite enjoyable. I have also discovered something else. I discovered that the little metal switch over here, the antenna selector, that takes solder. Okay, so it's not aluminium. I also discovered that that little foil, the little bit of well, metal strip that I used to make this was not aluminium as I thought it was. It's actually some sort of steel, so it takes solder as well. So the easiest way to do this is actually just wet the remaining part of the switch with solder, put some solder on the top and just let them glue together. This is now soldered in place, and I think this thing's going to hold quite well. I think I might still put another little bit of black heat shrink over here just to make this edge nicer, but that's done as well. Of course, I've still got the problem with the antenna. I'm a little bit reluctant to try and bend this one in. I've got a feeling it'll break. I've got to somehow find a replacement for this one. These are pretty standard antennas, telescopics. I don't think they're too difficult to replace. I might not get one with this sort of teardrop shape at the end, but it shouldn't be too much of a problem trying to find replacements for this. So this radio is almost at an end, depending on just how stubborn that front end proves to be. And this is where I'll leave you for today. I want to thank you for your company. Hope you've enjoyed that. Hope you've enjoyed looking at my Marie Antoinette. Actually, it's just called an Antoinette. And I hope you stick around or come back for me to show you the final result, which I hope will be a good one. Once again, thanks for watching. Bye for now and stay safe.